Welcome. It is Rebecca Schisler Marshall here and Erin Sheriff for episode 4 of the Vibrant, Wild, and Free series for mystics and scientists and everyone in between. So welcome, Erin. I'm so glad to be here with you again.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. So happy to be here with you.
Yay! Today we have a very exciting topic. We kind of alluded to it a little bit in episode 3. We're going to be talking about conditioning and the habits that we have, how we're adapted to culture, and how we can change those habits, a little bit about changing those habits. So it's very exciting to talk about today.
It is very exciting to talk about. And I think both of us probably see this a lot in our clients and also ourselves, how some of the old messages from the culture can be getting in our way. And it can be a really important thing if you want to live a more vibrant, wild, and free life to examine some of that conditioning, to see it as just conditioning, and to know that we have a choice whether we want to believe those old stories and let them run the show or not.
Yes. Yeah, I love that. Do we want to believe those old stories and let them run the show? Because that's exactly what's happening. Is anytime we, especially an unexamined belief, that we just think, well, of course that is true, that you have to work really, really hard to do anything, to make any progress in anything, then we believe that, then that's the underlying message. That's the underlying driver of everything.
Yeah, it's like our operating system has all of these bugs in it that are slowing us down, and to stop and look and question and to maybe shed some of those bugs can really speed things up and energize the system in new and fun and surprising ways.
I love that. And if you want to install the Vibrant, Wild, and Free operating system, like to go with that, that's a great way of looking at it. It's like, oh yeah, you need to get rid of some of those bugs. You need a different operating system.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And so the old conditioning, because we all have it, so it's something to be ashamed of. And it's really important if you want to kind of optimize things to just be able to name it and look at it and see it clearly. And I was thinking, where does it come from? And it comes from
Mm-hmm.
so many sources. We get the conditioning from our family of origin, I guess, first and foremost, our parents or whoever is raising us from the blank slate of a baby as we come in. So we get all of that put on us for better or worse. And then the conditioning comes from our country. That's can be a very biased slant depending on the situation. We get conditioning from the media. We get conditioning from our peers. So we're getting it from all angles, from many, many angles. I don't, do you have any other ways that we get conditioned, Rebecca? Oh, schools, definitely schools.
Yeah. And I was thinking, even as you said, like our country, like even within, it's 2019, we're in America, and even within America, there are lots of different cultures within this particular country. And that culture, whatever culture it is, it could be, a particular religious culture. It could be a particular culture of people that you hang out with, like a certain group. That can really influence when there are lots of beliefs of, how things should be, or how the world works. That's the way I like to kind of think of conditioning is, well, these are kind of the basic rules that we accept and believe without questioning them.
Right. And why might it be important to question them? How can these beliefs get in the way of our vibrancy and our well-being?
Yeah, I going with kind of metaphors as we were talking about it before, but when you think about conditioning, I kind of think about it as like a blanket on the light or the truth of what really is. So it's like there are these different layers of, I keep thinking one of my beliefs that I was handed was that you have to work really hard to be successful, like long hours. It's just a hard road. You have to travel uphill both ways in the snow, like all of that is true. And my experience has been, as I've looked at that, is that that's not necessarily true. So it's like, oh wait, that's actually just a belief and not necessarily the hard, cold truth, or the light of truth of what I like to think of. Now I can't remember your question, but I think that's the way that I see them and why it can be important in at least looking at
Mm-hmm.
what conditioning is there.
Yes, that was well said. And I think for me and for a lot of people, probably some other conditioning messages that we get are that we're not good in certain ways. We're not good enough, you know?
Oh, that's such a good one. And it's so pervasive.
It's so pervasive. And if we don't stop to examine it, we may not even know how much of an influence it's having on our lives, how much it's inhibiting us from reaching our full potential because it's so ingrained and we've accepted it as truth at some level.
Yes. Yeah, we don't even, it really is. It's so hard to see. It's like being in water and wondering, what's the big deal is. Like, what is water? Because you're swimming in it all the time.
Right.
That belief of not being enough, that, it's so funny as you mentioned that, I was like, oh yeah, I forgot that one because I have been swimming in it for most of my life.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really
Yeah.
good one.
Yeah. I still have a toe dipped in that one. And, but it's really even just the seeing it and knowing that it's not a truth. It's not a gospel truth. It's not solid. It's just something insidious that's sort of like a virus that's gotten in there. And slowly but surely we can heal from those. And as we shed that baggage slowly but surely, it opens up space for new possibilities and new ways of being.
Yes, right. A new way of being instead of swimming in the same thing that we've been swimming in, those same beliefs. Then, as we shed those blankets, those layers, it does allow us to be more true to who we really are, and that's the vibrancy. I think that's where it's like, it's freedom and it allows for vibrancy because then we aren't carrying around something that isn't consistent with who we are. So
Right.
if we think we're not good enough, but really, my belief is that we are all equal to our own existence. Like we are all good enough, in quotes, whatever that good enough is. And if we're carrying around the belief, it's like an extra, it's a wet blanket that you're carrying.
It's a wet blanket, which is heavier. There's a heaviness to it. And I think sometimes we don't even realize that we're wearing it, as you said, Rebecca, because we've had it on for so long. But as we start to shed it, there's a certain lightness that
Yeah.
emerges and a certain fun. And it's almost like, at least this is how it was for me, getting to know somebody that you've known for a long time, namely yourself, but at a different level, a more intimate level. And okay, who am I really underneath all this conditioning? What do I believe? What's
Yeah.
true for me and what's not true for me? What can I put down? And it's just a continuous expansion, I think, the more we play in this field.
Right. Yeah, it is an expansion because then it's like the possibilities become, um, there are more possibilities when you take off some of those layers and some of those beliefs of like, oh, I thought there was only, well, you have to do it this way. You have to have this, you have to have that, you have to follow this path. And then it's like, well, maybe actually, no. Then it's like, oh, there's this expansiveness that happens that's available that we don't have to we don't have to live the way that we've been told. Everyone doesn't have to fit the same little box, which is why I think when you're talking about school or culture, it's beneficial for the culture to say this is how it works, but it's not necessarily beneficial for the people.
That's so true. That is such profound wisdom right there, Rebecca. Yeah, it's beneficial for the system, but not necessarily for the individuals within that system.
Yes.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
there's a biologic imperative to some degree to conform to the conditioning because for survival
Yes.
purposes, as little babies, if we're not accepted by the tribe, if we were shunned, hypothetically, that would lead to a death sentence. So there's something built into our genes to conform to certain extents.
Yeah.
So we're kind of hardwired. We come by this naturally. It's not like we did anything wrong, or it's just kind of the way it goes. But now that we have the luxury, so to speak, in our culture of having maybe the time and the bandwidth to examine some of this, it creates opportunities for more thriving in the world and offering up our gifts more freely once we can shed some of that baggage.
Yes. And I love that, offering our gifts more freely, right? Because then it's this, it's not just about how do I feel, but then it's like, well, what can I reciprocate? How can I give back, right? How can I be at one with receiving and giving in that way of, being on purpose, being on track.
Right. And that part's really helped me because, again, it's, you don't want to be selfish, it's self-centered to kind of do this and spend so much time on this, but it's really not, if you think about it as there are gifts. We all come into this world with light, with gifts, just the gift of our presence and the full expression of our being. And if we're hiding that, that's a lost opportunity to care, to bring compassion, to bring love, to bring ourselves, whatever that is in its fullest expression.
Yes. Yes,
So,
I love that. Yeah, bringing ourselves in the fullest expression, whatever that may be. We don't know what that looks like necessarily until we do exactly what you were describing before of getting to know the most important person, which is ourselves. And I often talk about that with clients of that's the nugget, right? The nugget of vibrancy and being free is being connected with yourself.
mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's almost like unwrapping a present,
Yeah.
and especially I think for a lot of women have experienced trauma to varying degrees along the course of their lives, and then build up defense mechanisms around that to protect them from future trauma. And it might be food, it could be shopping, other things. And so there can be a lot of conditioning there to kind of wade through, but it's all doable and it's all figure outable
I
over
love
time and with great compassion.
Yeah, with great compassion. Totally. I mean, I think that's the only way to unravel some of this conditioning. So, Erin, tell me, I'd love to hear, for people who are like, okay, I get it. I've got this conditioning. And now what? Now, what do I do if I want to, let go of some of those heavy, wet blankets? If I want to unravel some of this, what do you see as important in changing it?
Mm. Well, the first thing I guess would be a willingness to let it
Mm.
go. It can be scary to let it go. It's a defense mechanism of sorts. So maybe not everybody is ready right now to start to shed that, and that's totally okay too. But for somebody that says, you know what, yeah, I've been carrying this wet blanket for enough decades, I'm ready to start shedding it. I think the first and most important thing is to get to know it really intimately
Mm.
and to not fight with it and to sit with it. And you may not be surprised to know that I think mindfulness is a great way
Of course.
do that, because it creates a container. It creates a container, a space for you to engage with that thing, whatever the conditioning is, in maybe a new way, a new, more intimate way. You kind of befriend it and you get to know it intimately because it's there for a reason. It's there as trying to help you in some way. So you get to know it, you see it clearly, and only from that place of seeing it clearly and knowing it intimately, whatever it is, can you decide. And you can also only decide right now, whenever now is. You can't let it go in the past or the future. So you've got to drop right into right now, get to know it, and then if it really truly feels like it's not serving you, and you really truly feel like you're ready to start to shed it, a mindfulness practice can help you develop new attitudes of mind, to create new choices. And I hope that doesn't sound too vague, but I'd love to hear what you have to say around that, Rebecca.
Yeah, well, of course, I'm a mindfulness person too. So I agree because part of that is, I think, the willingness. I think I agree. Like there's something about like, I'm ready, right? That's what I feel like when people say, when people really like, they feel that they're ready, that's the willingness. It's kind of like, yep, I know I need to do this. I want to do this. And the other piece that I feel that mindfulness brings into it, and I think this is what you're saying, is the awareness piece of like, not just the willingness, but also the presence, as you're saying, like in that moment, that like, oh, this is how this is stopping me. And when you see that, it's you can't, it's hard to unsee it, you know. You just, when you're seeing that and you see how this thing is getting in the way of you being where you want to be, and you thought it was, well, it's just not possible, or I'm not good enough, and it's like, oh, it's my belief that's stopping me. That awareness is part of what I think mindfulness is so helpful in you know, in fostering and bringing about, is because it's just those pieces together of mindfulness and willingness are truly so powerful.
Yes. That was so well said, Rebecca. And I'm remembering one of my clients just last night used a beautiful word around all of this. And she said that the mindfulness is helping her unravel the conditioning, unravel it. Because at first, if you don't investigate it, it's just this heavy wet blanket. It's just this operating system that's there running. But when you bring it into your awareness, it helps to dissolve it a little bit into its component parts. It doesn't feel so heavy, so immovable. So what is the conditioning? How is it showing up? It's a sensation in the body. Look at that. That's one piece of it. It's very clear. You can investigate that and know that individual piece.
Yes.
It's certain emotions that show up around that. We can investigate those emotions. What are they? Fear, anger, grief, whatever they are.
Yeah.
And then there's a corresponding thought that goes with the belief. I'm not good enough. I have to work hard, whatever it is. Those are three separate things. And they can be put down either together or separately. But the dissolving, the pixelating, the having the mindfulness be a solvent, I like that as an image and a metaphor.
Yeah. And you know, it's interesting as you're saying that, the other piece, and I love how you brought in the, you know, it's not just like, oh, it's mindfulness. It's like mindfulness of the emotions, mindfulness of the thoughts, mindfulness of the body, right? It's like all of those pieces. And it occurs to me, right, there's also that energy component too, right? There's another layer that sometimes we often don't talk about in this culture, talk about being conditioned, of like that there are other pieces that maybe there's an energetic, this gets a little harder to put words to, but this idea of maybe there's a connection, an energetic connection to that particular belief or to that thought that isn't yours, that doesn't necessarily belong to you, that was handed down to you through ancestors or, you know, through parents, through conditioning, through beliefs. So there are these different layers of it that being aware of, being willing to look at, you can unravel it. I love that your client said that. That's beautiful.
Yeah, and I think maybe what you're pointing to, Rebecca, with what you just said is the combination of the mindfulness with, you could call it energy work, shamanic healing, spiritual healing, that those two together can be a really potent combination. Would you agree?
Oh yes, that's my experience, is that one without the other. The example I like to use is when I think about, you know, not using all the tools that we have available to us. It's kind of like trying to mow the grass with tweezers. It's possible, but it's really not the most efficient way. So why not do it in the most efficient and effective way of working with spirit, working with shamanic or energy, you know, however it feels right to you, whatever feels like is calling to you, and mindfulness and those emotions, you know, the coaching that comes along with that as well, of what do I do now that I've seen this and I want to change,
Yes.
and make a difference in my life to be more, hopefully, vibrant, wild, and free.
Beautiful. And so in your experience, Rebecca, with yourself and with clients, how quickly does this process move? Is it quick? Is it slow? What's your sense?
Well, I think that's it's kind of a challenging question to answer because I've seen both. I've seen people who unravel in that way that you described, of piece by piece, really looking at things, and it's just a little more methodical. And then I see some people that it's more like the dam has been opened, and and in my experience, there are times when I'm like, I'm just finished with that. I can no longer carry that. And so I don't need to unravel the blanket. I'm just going to throw it down
Mhm.
and be finished with it and move on from that place, because I've seen it. And it's like, why would I take the time? And then there are others that, in my experience as well, it's many, many years of being willing and looking and practicing.
Right.
How
Thank
about you? What have you seen for your experience or with your clients?
The same. It's very much an individual journey, and you just never know how it's going to go. So anything's possible. It may take an investment of time and
Yeah.
energy, which makes sense to me since the conditioning has been there for decades in most cases.
Yes.
So it, in my experience, it's not typical that it's instantaneous. It takes a little bit of investment and investigation into the process, but it doesn't have to take decades to undo it either. So,
Right. Right. And I think, one of the things that we mentioned in I think it was episode 3, we were talking about why retreating, then, having a retreat like we have set up in Mexico at the Vibrant, at the Haramara, Seaside Retreat Center, is one of the ways that can assist in unraveling and beginning to see, because you're stepping out of culture for even that,
mm-hmm.
7 days. It makes it so much easier to become aware of what is there, and what's possible, what's different, what could be different.
Absolutely. A retreat is a precious opportunity, and I do one every year. I try to do a 7-day every single year for the past 10 years
Oh, wow.
because it's so valuable. And it's really a concentrated container where everything is there to support you in this process, whatever it means for you and whatever it looks like for you. You get to physically leave the conditioning, the culture behind, and
Yes.
step into a space that's completely dedicated to doing this work, with people there to support you and beautiful food there to support you and whales in this case there to support you. So yeah, a retreat is a beautiful kind of jumpstart and investment in this process. Whether
Yeah.
it's ours or another retreat, just in general as a concept, I highly recommend it.
Yeah, yeah, I agree that, that's been my experience as well. Is there's something about, even one day away can offer insights, but having that constructed period of time that's even longer, you can just imagine how that can build on each other. Then when you have not just one day away and you go, oh, that was nice, you can let go. You can, I hear a lot of people talk about decompressing when they first go away. It takes a few days to kind of expand, as we were talking about previously. And so when you have several days away, you can set things down and practice a new way of being.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, do you have any final thoughts for people, Rebecca? That sounds like a beautiful way to finish up here.
Yeah, I think that if people have some interest in looking more at their beliefs, their conditioned beliefs, or how to change those, both of us would be happy to chat. I think that that's something that is, both of us are very invested in shifting that belief of things have to be a certain way.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Rebecca. As always, this has been a pleasure, and I look forward
Ew.
to our next conversation.
Yep. We'll see everyone soon. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.